What's up, everybody? It's Dan from Binder Boneyard coming at you from the office. It's finally a decent day. It's mid-60s here. It is Easter Sunday when I am recording this. Just happy to be here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Appreciate it very much. Patreon supporters and all that. Very grateful, like always. So, it's been a busy week unloading stuff from the haul that I talked about last week, and that sort of stuff. Just busy as always, which is good. Sometimes it's overwhelming, too much, irritated customers, stuff taking too long, that kind of thing. But it is what it is, and it's what happens when you are well known. So, until I get more hands in the door, that's the best that I'm going to be able to do. So, anyway, in today's episode, we are going to be talking about towing. And this isn't just limited to, 1-ton pickups. I'm going to try to cover a lot of different things, and several of the things kind of overlap as well. So if you got a 4-cylinder Scout 80 and you still want to haul something, this is just as relevant for you as it is for the guy with the 1310 Camper Special Travelette. So we're going to jump right in. I'm definitely not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert at any of this stuff, but what I do claim is that I've been doing it long enough, and I do it so much that I have learned a lot. I've learned more doing this than a lot of people will, in their whole life. I've towed stuff across the country so many times that I've seen stuff break and fall apart and come loose that you would never imagine in a million years. I had the dang hairpin come out of my hitch pin one time because I hit a chunk of tire on the road and it popped the pin out. That's the only thing I can think of, because the other end of my hitch pin was bent. It's bent so that the hitch pin can't rotate. It's locked in place. So it's not like the pin rotated and then the hairpin came out. Something had to have struck it to push it out. So I've started putting my pin in the other way, the other direction, so that any road debris kicking up pushes it in harder and not the other way where it can push it out. But anyway, we will back up and start with the basics as far as your vehicle setup goes. Many of the internationals, Scouts, Trucks, Travelalls, had the option of a step bumper, which is like the truck bumper style instead of, the smooth chrome or whatever. And on this step bumper, there's usually a hole or 2 or 3 for a ball. And pretty much every truck that's ever come in here that had a step bumper had a ball on it. And, the balls vary from, what are they? 1 5/8. There's a weird size in there. I don't tow really light stuff, so I don't have a ton of experience with the small balls. But I want to say there's like an 1 5/8 ball and then a 2-inch ball. And I've seen people get them confused and put a 2-inch hitch on an 1 5/8 ball, and it holds, but it doesn't last forever. It will come off. So, you got to pay attention to the ball sizing in relation to what trailer you're going to be pulling. And a lot of these trailers have the ball size stamped on the tongue somewhere, usually around the handle, unless it's a really old trailer. Most of the modern hitches have what ball size is supposed to be stamped on it. But what I'm getting at is that step bumper, depending on how it's attached, if it's attached like the factory had it, like on a Scout 2, where it uses two kind of angle pieces bent, and then they run down the frame and they're attached to the frame in a couple places, you're good. I want to say it's good for 250 pounds of tongue weight, and I think they limit your capacity. Man, I wouldn't tow anything more than like 2,500 pounds with it. Small aluminum boat, a small camp trailer, a pop-up tent trailer, something like that. Again, some of these numbers are coming out of my butt because I don't have the stuff in front of me, because I don't prepare for this. I just do this off of what I know and what I kind of remember. So again, don't overdo it on the tongue weight for the step bumper, because they can't handle a lot. So, and this is true all the way up into the pickups. I've seen plenty of 3/4 ton pickups come in here with just step bumpers and a hitch, and usually they've welded the ball to the bumper because it's come loose, or they didn't have a nut or something, and so they just weld it on. And I don't recommend doing that, just because. But if you are planning on only towing something really light, the bumper mounted ball is satisfactory, especially in the early Scouts, the little 80s and 800s or 4-cylinders. I wouldn't tow more than about 2,000 pounds with it anyways. And that's not just because of the bumper capacity, that's the vehicle capacity. Especially in the 80s, that little Dana 27 can only take so much abuse, and you start hooking up weight to it, you're just adding more stress on the axle shafts and the ring and pinion. Not to mention the brakes. Vehicle brakes are super important. And the early Scouts with their 9-inch front drums and 9-inch rear drums, and they're decent for the Scout themselves, but when you start loading them up, you really are pushing it. And then, okay, so you put trailer brake controller in, and then you can have trailer brakes. That's helpful, but it's not exactly an end all for brake problems. So again, you want to kind of restrict yourself to what your vehicle is capable of. And, towing like that, early Scouts, like I said, you're good for small trailers, small pop-up camper, a small aluminum boat, a canoe trailer or something like that. But it really, I definitely wouldn't go more than about 2,500 pounds of whatever you're towing behind you. V8 800s, they give you all the confidence to pull the weight, especially when you've got a 4-speed and a Dana 44. You can tow more. The brakes are a little bigger on the 800s. The drivetrain's a little more robust. But again, your brakes are still your limiting factor. And then it's a smaller vehicle. Yeah, it's got a 100-inch wheelbase, but it's narrow and it's still fairly light. You're 4,000 pounds or so. So again, I wouldn't tow anything more than 3,000, 3,500 pounds. If you had a trailer brake controller and like a front disc conversion and all that, then I would be okay with going up to like 4,000 pounds, 4,500 pounds, a small camp trailer, a decent little boat, and things like that. And you also have to consider, if you're towing a boat and you got the family, and you got your gear in the Scout and you got stuff, you're not just pulling a 3,000 pound boat, you're also hauling 1,000 pounds of extra gear now. So that also adds to the load that the Scout has to carry. So keep that in mind also, not just loading in that respect, but loading overall. So, and I know we've all heard the stories, or we've all seen, or we all know someone's grandpa's uncle's brother, sister that hauled, a 40-foot mobile home behind their Scout and, whatever. But I just try to err on the side of safety and function. There's no sense in operating at the max capacity of what you've got. I've done that for years, and it always bites you. I try not to go more than about 75% of max. So if the literature says that you're capable of 5,000 pounds of towing a 5,000 pound trailer, I really try not to go over 4,000 pounds, just to help keep the wear and tear down and the safety, keep the brakes working and that kind of thing. So, so if you've got a V8 800 and you've got some updated brakes, you can push that weight capacity a little bit. But remember, you're still using a step bumper, and the tongue weight on a step bumper is pretty limited. So you start pulling weight, you're putting a lot of stress on that step bumper. There are receiver hitches available for the Scouts that, it's the square tube receiver, class 2, class 3, class 4, that you can mount to the Scout frame, which does increase the safety of towing. Doesn't do anything for the weight capacity of the truck or anything like that, but it definitely makes your attachment point safer. And then that brings me up to the Scout 2. Scout 2s are a little more capable at towing. Again, step bumper, you're still limited. I think the Scout 2 step bumpers were good to like 500 pounds, but I would consider that max capacity for a Scout 2 step bumper. The class 3 or class 4 receiver hitch is a lot more common for the Scout 2s. I definitely recommend you get that. Even if you're towing a small item, small boat, whatever, receiver hitch is just a better way to go in general. And then you can use the step bumper as a step and not have a ball in the way that you have to step around or whatever. I like the receiver hitches on everything. And so I would recommend that with your Scout 2. And Scout 2s are good. V8, Dana 44s again for the axles, and they're just more durable for towing. I do believe a Scout 2 is rated at 5,000 pounds. So, make sure your tires are up to that load. If you have an automatic transmission, definitely make sure you have an additional cooler, not just the cooler that's in the radiator already, but a secondary standalone external fin cooler for that transmission fluid. It's very important that the transmission fluid stay cool and up to the level. Again, the brakes, make sure your brakes are up to snuff. You've got the 11-inch drums, make sure they're good shoes and adjusted up. Make sure your discs are good shape. If you do have a drum brake, Scout 2, 72, 73, make sure your drums are adjusted good. All that stuff is tuned up the way it should be. Your cooling system is up to it, because if you're going to pull a 4,000 pound trailer, especially a camper, it's not just the weight you're hitting, you've got wind drag, and that camper just bashing against the air the whole way. It makes it feel like you're towing 6,000 pounds. So your cooling system needs to be up to it. The tune needs to be good. Like, it really needs to be in tip-top operating condition for towing. I've seen guys use the stabilizer bars, those spring bars that go off of a load distributing hitch. Those help some with like the bounce going down the road and just some of the stability. But yeah, I just, you really want the Scout to be in tip top shape, good shocks, that kind of thing. And then make sure that your trailer is also ready for the road, good tires, it's loaded correctly, you don't have too much tail weight. I've seen campers get loaded where, it's got a spare tire on the back and a bicycle rack on the back. And then when it gets loaded, for some reason, all the coolers and the gear gets put in the back. And then you start going down the road and you get wicked fishtail and you don't know why. It's like, well, move everything to the front, move the tongue, everything to the front. And that generally will solve the fishtail. And I try not to mount too much stuff to the back of the camper anyways, because if it falls off, you might not know it falls off. So that's what I would do on the Scout 2. The Traveler and Terra is the same way. They're just longer, 118-inch wheelbase, but they're essentially the same as the Scout 2. So all that stuff applies to them as far as mechanical condition. I do like towing with the Terra a little bit more, or a Traveler. That little bit extra wheelbase, that 18 inches, they just seem to tow better. A little more stable, tow a little straighter, just handle a trailer a little bit better. I still would keep your weight capacity around the same, and pay attention. But Terras and Travelers are good pullers in when you're doing light duty stuff like that. Travel-Alls. Now we're getting up into truck stuff. The Travel-Alls are kind of meant to tow. Like, their advertisements were always about towing family outings. Yeah, they're station wagons, but they're more rugged. Guys tow with 1010 Travel-Alls all the time. I personally am not a fan of the 1010 because they have that torsion bar front end, or IFS front end, and they're usually Dana 44s in the back. And a Dana 44 and a Scout is fine, but you get into a full size and you're pushing the weight capacity of that 44. That's why some of the half-ton Travel-Alls had a Dana 60. It was still a semi-float, still had a set 10 bearing end, just like a Dana 44, but it had the bigger ring and pinion of the 60. So, because you will wear out ring and pinions if you're towing all the time with a small axle. So, again, you can tow with a 1010, and they make fine towers. The extra wheelbase, because Travel-Alls are 119. They're wider, they're lower. Of course, then you've got the V8, especially if you're lucky and you got a 392 or even a 345. They're, just good trailer pullers. The capacity goes up on those as well. I don't know the Travel-All numbers off the top of my head. But I do recommend, when you start getting into the bigger, anything over about, even with the Scout 2s, I would recommend a trailer brake controller if you're towing, a 4,000 or 5,000 pound camper. But I would almost, it's a must when you start getting above 3,500 pounds in a tow, whatever, boat, camper, whatever. When you start getting that heavy, you definitely need a trailer brake controller. And then I would look more into the stabilizer hitches as well. They're important just for keeping the trailer under control when you hit bumps or uneven road surfaces or things like that. Like, it's just another one of those important things. I don't use them all the time, usually because my trucks have such heavy springs that I don't get that bounce. But I'll talk about that later. The other half-ton Travel-Alls, like the hundreds in 2 or 4-wheel drive, I would consider that the next step up from the 1010. Yeah, they're still Dana 44, but they're usually a little bit heavier duty. As far as suspension packages go, you get that class 3 hitch. So again, same as before with the Travelall, just really stop using step bumpers if they have them and go to an actual class 3 or class 4 hitch. That's really the important thing there, is just how you attach them. So hopefully this isn't too choppy. I just got a warning that my computer is freaking out, and I think some of the audio got dropped, but I don't know yet. Anyway, it's all about how you attach the trailer, making sure you have a good hitch. 2-inch ball is kind of the standard. I run 2 5/16 ball on all my heavy trailers, just because of more capacity. But anyway, yeah. So then you move up again into some of the options with the tow packages on the Travelalls were things like sway bars. The sway bars are handy just to help keep the roll down when you're going around corners and things like that. Shock packages, there were like air shocks that you could like pump up to help support the load so you didn't get so much tail drag. And I recommend airbags to, if you're towing a heavy trailer or anything like that really airbags. And I know I should take my own advice. I don't have airbags on the black truck. And I probably should with the amount of weight that I haul. But and it's on my list. I've got the bags. I've got brackets. I just, get off my butt and do them. So, yeah. But then we move up into pickups. Half-ton short bed pickups are the same as the Travelall, 119 usually, or 122 or something. It varies on the package. But same thing, class 3 hitch. Don't depend on that step bumper. Get yourself a trailer brake controller, making sure all of your mechanicals are top-notch. Remember you're going to use twice as much fuel when you're towing. So if you've only got one tank and a questionable fuel gauge, you might want to do something about that. And then we move up into 3/4 tons. Travelalls, they did have a 3/4 ton Travelall. And, it's set up the same way, just heavy springs, sway bar. Usually I like the airbags if you're pulling. 3/4 tons had full float rear ends, which are Dana 60s, or in the C series, the early ones, you had like the RA10, RA11, which is like the international version of a full float axle, sometimes referred to as a corporate axle. And so, and they're good. They're fine axles as well. It's just hard to get parts for now. Ring and pinions and stuff are obsolete. But the Dana 60s that came in the 3/4 tons is a fine axle, full float, meaning that the weight of the truck is carried on 2 roller bearings, and the power is transmitted through an axle shaft that floats through the spindle. It doesn't touch anything until it gets to the hub flange where it bolts on to the outer hub flange. They usually have good sized brakes. So again, if you're towing with your pickup, make sure it's up to the task. Good brakes or tuned up brakes, proper operation. By now you should absolutely have trailer brake controller. No excuse not to. Make sure your wiring is good. I've seen so many with just scabbed together, Scotch lock, duct tape, wrapped up, crappy wiring jobs. A good 7-pin flat RV connector is kind of the gold standard these days. That's what everything's set up for. There's wiring diagrams online so you can wire it correctly. So no matter what trailer you hook up to, at least your end is correct. But that's super important, making sure you have good trailer lights. Having an inline fuse on the trailer plugs is a good idea. So, the factory light circuit in an international pickup uses, I think it's a 14 amp fuse, 14 amp glass fuse. And if you hook up a trailer, now you've added more load to the light circuit, not just, the truck lights, but now it's got to power however many lights are on your trailer, which you should have at least 2 on the back, if not more than that. So if you have any questionable electrical connections or anything like that, you are going to risk blowing that fuse. And you might not know it until, it's dark, because the headlights are on a separate fuse. So you might be going down the road and, your headlights will be working, but none of the other lights will. So one of the things that I used to do back in the day was on my trailer plugs, I would add inline fuses. If the truck fuse was a 14 amp, I would put a 10 amp inline fuse. That way that fuse would blow before the truck one. And this was important, if you didn't carry a lot of extra parts, or you didn't want to carry a whole big pack of fuses with you, as far as, for the truck. The glass fuses are getting hard to get and that kind of thing. So you just do the inline fuse holders with the blade fuses, and those are way easier to get. And then the other thing is, if you have a camper and you are running a charge wire to keep the batteries up or things like that, make sure that the truck, again, has a good fuse on it, so that you're not forcing the truck, a battery or alternator, to charge up a battery that has too much draw, or another problem like that. You want to separate the truck from any kind of connection problem, draw problem, short, anything like that. So having inline fuse in that circuit is a good idea. But don't half-ass it when you're wiring in your trailer plug. If you're back there, and don't just hook up the turn signal and the running lights. Like, make sure you connect the ground circuit, and make sure that you run the brake wire, and make sure you run the charge wire. And some of them have the backup light wire, which is depending on which diagram you look at. So if you are going to hook all that stuff up, just do it. And then in the future, because it never friggin' fails, that it's the night before you're leaving for a camping trip, or you're leaving for a boat trip, or whatever, you hook up and, this doesn't work. That doesn't work. This isn't charging. Oh, the brake wires, my brakes, I don't have it, or whatever. And it's your last minute, you're out there with a headlamp trying to wire in another circuit into your trailer plug, when you could have done it initially and been ready to go. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be wired wrong for your buddy's hack boat trailer plug, and that leads me to another little tangent about borrowing trailers from people. I gave up on that years ago, partially because my business needed its own trailers, and so I just had to buy them. But there was a time where I was borrowing trailers, and every time I borrowed a trailer, I'd have to rewire the dang plug, because theirs was just janky, broken, backed up, stuff crossed. You turn on the right signal and the left one would blink, and so I just ended up, I'd have to fix these trailers or adjust my plug to adapt to their trailer, and it just got really old. So I just ended up having my own trailers, and then everything was wired fine, and I didn't have to worry about it. But it's one of those things where you want to just make sure your stuff is set up right from the get-go, and then you don't have to worry about it in the future, and it's just easier that way. So Yeah, and then the final thing is it all applies even up to, like I say, the 1 ton, the 1310, 1300 camper special travelettes, whatever. Sway bars, class 4 hitch, good trailer brakes, good brakes. Make sure your stuff is up to the task of pulling. Good fuel filters, because you're going to be running way higher in throttle just to keep going down the road. You know, Again, with the automatics, if you're towing really heavy, I would recommend an even larger cooler, or even a standalone cooler with its own fan on it, and maybe even a temperature gauge so that you can monitor the trans temperature, just so that hey, you just climbed Rattlesnake Pass in Wyoming, and that is hell on automatic transmissions. I know, because I've gone up it before. And knowing what my trans temp is a extremely invaluable feature. So something to look into if you're going to tow all the time. And we set up a lot of our restorations with those gauges because people are doing it to tow. They want, we're building a LS powered C-Series Travelall, and the guy's sole duty for it, besides some, putter around town, is to tow an Airstream. So it's getting a trans temp gauge, and it's getting some other features that are going to make it, that much better. So anyway, hopefully it was mildly informative. I'm sure there were some pretty obvious things, especially you guys that tow often. You already know this stuff. But anyway, hopefully you guys learned something, and I appreciate you guys. Remember to like it, share it, subscribe it, tell your friends. And until next time, I'm Dan from Binder Boneyard.